fighting social justice. Some people become activists positioned at picket lines. Others work with those from disadvantaged groups as career counselors, teachers in underserved communities, or public defenders. Still others attempt to bring about high-level change by running for public office or informing policy decisions with research. Indeed, social justice is relevant to many disciplines, including public health, economics, the environment, and therefore our degree is interdisciplinary, and many students, in fact, decide to double major. We have two sections of Introduction to Social Justice right now, one that I teach with Dr. Ponce, another that Professor Mickey Huff teaches with Dr. Ponce, and in spring, our comrade, Dr. Frank Ortega, will teach a section of Introduction to Social Justice for high school students. So we plan to get this process started as early as we can. Activist and scholar Tim Wise urges us to focus on media literacy, ethics, sociology, and history, not just science, technology, engineering, and math. Because if these are not given equal attention, he says, we could end up with incredibly bright and technically proficient people who lack all capacity for democratic citizenship. The future of the nation and our world depends on an engaged, informed, and critically thinking population. For this and many other reasons, we are so proud to be collaborating with our journalism program for today's events. For us, the journalism that matters aligns with grassroots community organizing and movements for justice, trying to make things better, recognizing that there are going to be debates within that, telling untold stories of people who are disenfranchised, vulnerable, or oppressed, shines the light on injustice and inequality. So for right now, I wanted to invite my comrades from journalism, Professors Mickey Huff and Michael Leverton, to introduce themselves and say a few words about their program.
Thanks so much, Drs. Nyogi and Ponce. It is an honor to be here today. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Mickey Huff. I'm professor of social science, history, and journalism at Diablo Valley College, co-chair of history and also chair of the journalism department. I'm with my full-time colleague, Professor Michael Leverton, who's going to talk a little bit about our program in a moment. But just very quickly, again, it's an honor to be here working collaboratively, journalism, social justice, history, social science across the curriculum. As you heard Dr. Nyogi say, we need MESH, not just STEM. And I could not agree more with all of the things that she just said. I'm also director of the critical media literacy organization, Project Censored. We do weekly radio shows on Pacifica. We do an annual book that's basically student generated, student researched, teaching them the importance of a truly independent and vibrant free press. And so we have students every year across the country involved, including at Diablo Valley College. So anybody here that's interested in learning more about critical media literacy and why it's necessary if we want to live in a more just and equitable world, you can feel free to contact us. We teach in multiple areas and disciplines. So again, please feel free to get in touch with us. I'll put a remark or two in the chat for anybody that may want to follow up. But the bottom line here is that democracy needs journalism. And it needs more than corporate journalism. It needs a true public interest media platform. Our special guest today, I'm sure, is going to illustrate why it's important to have public interest platforms over corporate ones. And it's a great honor to have Otis Taylor here today. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to my good friend and colleague, Professor Michael Leverton, to say a few words about our program, and then we will move right into today's special guest presentation. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here.
Thanks, Mickey, and I'm going to be super brief. I'm Michael Leverton, an assistant professor in journalism. I work right alongside Mickey. Really honored. I know Otis's work for a long time. I think I've run across Otis at the Bay Area Book Festival and at various events, and I know his trajectory has been a fascinating one recently, going to Atlanta and back, and now joining us in the Bay Area community. And I just want to say that social justice coverage is so much of the lens through which we try to look at journalism and teach young aspiring journalists at DVC. The movements we've seen in these recent years couldn't put more front and center the relevance and the role that the press plays in elevating, amplifying voices, causes, topics that have been buried and not discussed perhaps for decades in our country, if not longer. And it's really the role of the press, as Mickey and as Sangha said. So I really encourage people who are engaged in this subject, sign up for journalism, come learn introduction to reporting and writing, join the Inquirer, write stories on a public platform, get published, and really dig into these issues in the realest form. So handing it back to you.
No, and that was great to hear for all our students and our community to listen to the importance of journalism in this day and age. We see we're coming off of some elections across the country, from school boards to city council to supervisors to state governors. And what we see at large, what we study is how do we critically analyze the information that is generated by loads and loads of money. Right. So this is our job as critical thinkers, as scholars, us all in these spaces, to really think deeply about this. So it is, and this is why the social justice program intentionally works across disciplines to really formulate relationships with our colleagues on campus. So students are not only getting a critical lens in this program, but across the social sciences, in biology, in the arts, in the humanities, in engineering, and that's our goal. So today it's my honor to introduce our esteemed guest who will speak on this, Otis R. Taylor Jr., who's here with us, and we're very pleased to hear his talk. I'm very excited, and I'm sure we all are. Is a supervising senior editor for race and equity at KQED, which is an NPR affiliate in San Francisco. He's known for his award-winning work as a locally rooted journalist covering policing, housing, race, and gender issues, all through an equity lens. He was honored to be named SPJ NorCal's Journalist of the Year in 2020 at KQED. Otis is challenging the organization to think deeply about race and the role of systemic inequity in journalism in America, and how inequities are propagated by white supremacy. To better understand California and America, Otis believes journalists must focus more of their time covering historically marginalized and oppressed communities, and not just the elected officials purportedly representing those communities. Otis began his journalism career as a sports writer before covering arts, entertainment, and culture for a decade. He spent 4 years as the East Bay columnist of the San Francisco Chronicle before a brief stint as an investigative reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So let's all unmute briefly and give Otis a round of applause.
All right.
Welcome, Otis.
Thank you. I appreciate that introduction. How are we all doing today? We good? So just a little about what I do. I focus my work on race, housing, immigration, and cannabis, all with an equity lens. I'm often asked, why don't you write about something happy? Well, I'm not a clown, and I'll be happy when structural systemic racism is understood that it's not simply a personal prejudice, but rather it's a set of disadvantages that start with the average white child being born into families that have more wealth than your average child born into a person of color. That advantage extends into laws related to criminal justice, housing, voting, bank lending, educational systems. I just want to throw some numbers out to so you can understand the of what I'm talking about when we're talking about disadvantages, particularly with wealth. So in 2019, there was a survey that found that white families had the highest level of both median and mean family wealth, right? So those numbers were 188,000 for your median, and your mean was 983,000. Now that's okay. We see what that is. Black and Latinx families had 15% of that at their highest, 15%. And if you look at other groups, you know, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander, they had lower wealth than white families, but more than Black and Latinx. Instead of uplifting people to an equitable position, this country penalizes people for being poor. This is a central tenet of white supremacy, and that is to deny accessibility while punishing those who don't have access. Think about that. This is how America operates. This country operates exactly how it was designed. It would take trillions of dollars for Black Americans to get a share of this nation's wealth, to be commiserate to the population. And we're talking about compensation for, what I say, two and a half centuries of free labor that Black Americans gave. But here's the thing that really bugs me about white supremacy. It's that white people suffer from living in a society in which racial injustices and inequities persist. I talk to some folks and they're like, well, you know, my taxes do this, my taxes do that. Okay, well, if you acknowledge, first step is if you acknowledge that these inequities exist, right, then you can be part of the solution instead of complaining about what your tax dollars go to when there's no solution found. I read a paper recently. It's I like to read a lot, and this was in a scholarly magazine. It's called Science Advances, and this is what struck out to me. The paper was titled "Racial Attention Deficit," and the authors found that white Americans were 33% less likely to follow the choices of and learn from Black peers. It found that white Americans regarded Black peers as less competent than white ones. White Americans were statistically less likely to follow the example of Black peers, even when it would have resulted in a better decision. But when white Americans were able to witness the accomplishments of their Black peers rather than being told about them, the racial attention deficit dropped. I want you to hold that thought. I want you to ask yourself, why is that? Why is the narrative of Black people, really people of color, why is the narrative of them being lazy, I don't know, lacking intelligence, and leeching off the system? Why is that so pervasive? How could people come to believe that about people that they don't know and have no interaction with? Why is it that when I write about the marginalized and oppressed, I have white men in my inbox telling me, well, if they pulled up their pants, if they combed their hair, if they cut their hair, they would be fine? Why is that? Why is it that people of color have an expectation to conform to what white people think is acceptable in order to exist peacefully in a white-dominated society. White supremacy is the answer. But there's another answer too. It's the media. Then that's one thing that I agree with the rabid conspiracy theorists that have taken over the Republican Party is that that the media has a problem, but it's not what they think. After George Floyd was murdered, there was a reckoning coast to coast in media circles, from television to radio to newspapers. I mean, I have my job because of that. But it's the representation of non-white people in the media, and this is since the profession's inception, that has been dictated by the white lens. It's still a problem for the profession. Look, I came out here to liberal Bay Area and was like, yo, I'm gonna do this job and it's gonna be easy. Nah, I thought I would make my job obsolete in a matter of months, maybe years, right, at the most, right? Because I'm working with enlightened liberal colleagues. Nah, I could be doing this job for years until I retire or until I burn out. Let me give you an example. So there's a recall effort that has been successful to this point of the San Francisco Unified School District Board. 3 people are being recalled. And according to the people who are funding this recall, it's because, you know, they have an issue with renaming schools and also admission process to the best public school in the district. Okay, so I asked some reporters at KQED to, you know, give me a story, you know, tell me what is happening here. But I would like you to tell it from on the ground. I would like to hear real voices of people who will be impacted by this. I got a story about money. Okay, I'll take a look at it. Let's see what this is about. In the first draft of the story about money, it centered the people who were who had co-founded the recall effort. One of those people, a white woman, doesn't even have students or doesn't even have children who are students in a school district. She lives in Los Altos. Okay, well, who else do you have speaking on behalf of this recall? You had a white man who donated to the effort, who said he agreed with renaming schools, said he agreed that Lowell, that's the school, that's the best public school in the district, needed to address its admission processes to let more students of color in. He agreed with it. He was just mad at the way it was done. Then there was a man, white, rich, a venture capitalist who lives across the country. And his quote was, hey, I donated to this effort because I care about the marginalized and oppressed students. Okay, that's code for students of color. Well, okay. Then I asked the reporters to do the math. So you have a school district that's already tens of millions of dollars in debt. And you have a recall that's going to cost this school district, it's estimated at $40 million. I asked the reporters, so you mean to tell me that going further in debt is going to help the students that have been historically under-resourced in the school district? Oh, well, no, I probably not, probably not. So why are you letting this person say that's what he's doing it for without checking them, without pushing back and allowing him to say anything and you printing it? Okay, I see your point. One of the reporters said, well, he didn't break any laws. You know, the organizers of this effort haven't broken any laws. I thanked him for that response. And then I posed this question. Do you think the laws were made with inclusivity in mind? Yeah, you got a point there. Exactly. Why I put these reporters through that exercise, that ringer, is because for far too long, the journalism profession has just allowed people with power to speak for people who don't have any power. That doesn't make any sense, because people who don't have power will tell you exactly what they need. And it's incumbent on myself in this job and the journalists I work with to go and talk to the people who don't have power. For far too long, this profession has allowed people with wealth, with access, with resources to dictate the narrative of people without. I have an edict right now in my newsroom that I dare anyone to do a story on the Unhoused and not interview the Unhoused. I dare anyone to try to slip that by me, because that's disrespectful to me, it's disrespectful to the profession, and it's disrespectful to the people who are living outside, who are a living example of the failed American experiment. I also tell folks, if you're going to, for instance, if you're going to do a story about, I don't know, a shooting, don't just take the police word for it. The police will lie about anything, like the most trivial thing they will lie about, because it's all about burnishing their image as the good guys, the saviors, and the only people we can count on to do any good. And that's just so false. There was I was in a meeting, we have a daily budget meeting in the morning, and I was in a meeting, and an editor was saying, so the police are having a press conference, and this was after the violence against our AAPI neighbors, and it was like, so we're going to get a quote from probably, you know, a city council person, probably going to get a quote from whoever's representing Oakland police, probably get a quote. I think the FBI is going to be there. And I was like, are you going to talk to any Asian people? Any people who live and work in Chinatown? Oh, okay, hold on. Let me call a reporter. I'm just like, bruh, like, you are doing a story about what the response is to a community impacted by senseless violence, and you're not talking to the community? Like, how's that acceptable? Well, it's acceptable because that's the way journalism was done, until we had this reckoning where people of color realized that they had a voice, and they could raise that voice to say, no, this is unacceptable. Like, we have to do a better job. Like, we cannot call ourselves professionals if we're doing a half-assed job. And I wholly believe that. And that's because I have, throughout my career, I have taken it upon myself, particularly as a columnist out here, to design my work from the bottom up. And when I interviewed at the Chronicle and I'm telling y'all, I'm coming from off the streets, right? I was coming from a tech company, and they asked me to come interview. And the reason why is because I had been writing stories about the unhoused in my spare time. And the reason why is because I'm working for a tech company, I'm making bank. We're working in the office, and they're like, oh, you want dinner? You want lunch? Oh yeah, just expensive. Oh, you want to fly a colleague, from across the country? Oh yeah, just expensive. That's cool. We didn't have a realized idea. We had, what amounted to, we're going to put this team together and we're going to try to make this work. We got $4 million in our first round of funding for not having ideas, having pieces of paper. But I'm walking to this well-appointed office in my well-appointed tech job in the mission, and I'm having to walk by tent encampments. Like, how is that possible? How is a company who has an idea on paper getting all this money, and this person who's on the street just can't get a place to live? We can't support that. We can throw money at ideas, but we can't give people money or give people housing. And I started interacting with these people who, I think I started as trying to feel better about my station, but really it was an education. Particularly, there was this one woman, I walked past her and she was on the sidewalk, and it's probably like 9 o'clock at night, and she had pulled this a bathroom rug out of a dumpster, and she was like sitting on it and cutting it up, and she's like, I was like just standing by her, and she's like looks up and she's like, oh, I'm making a jacket, and I'm sorry, am I bothering you? I'm like, nah, this is like, you're on public property, you're good. And she's like, so yeah, I'm a furry. If anyone knows what a furry is, I was like, okay, cool. I noticed she had the hospital band on her wrist, and I was like, okay, this might be interesting. And she's like, yeah, I just got out of hospital. She peeped me looking at it, and I was like, may I sit down and talk to you? And she was like, why? I was like, well, I'm a writer. Maybe you have a story you'd like to tell. And she was like, as long as you don't try to like rape me, as long as essentially she was worried about me assaulting her. Someone asking if I could sit down. I was like, all right, that's messed up. She allowed me to. She started talking, and then she said that at 16, she started an international custody battle because she met a guy online who lived in Brazil. Somehow they got her a ticket and she flew to Brazil, and her parents tried to get her back. And I'm like, all right, wow, that's an interesting story. On my phone, looking it up, and it's like, she's telling the truth. This person who was on Good Morning America is now in San Francisco. She's from Massachusetts. She's in San Francisco cutting up a bathroom rug, unhoused. And I'm like, yo, do you mind if I just spend some time getting your story? We hung out the entire night, until I got tired and I could go back to my home. And she was like, I'm just going to go back over here. I got a tent over here. Dumpster diving. She was pointing out people, leaving stuff in their cars, why their cars would get ripped off. She was pointing me out places that she wouldn't go because being unhoused, it's a secret. Being unhoused, you are targeted not only by unhoused people, by people who have homes. That is messed up. There's a secret about homelessness. But she put me up on game. She allowed me to see the street from her perspective instead of my perspective, where I have a home and I have a place to go to. So I wrote a column about her and posted it on Medium. This woman's father found me and asked me, can you help me track my daughter down? I'm like, that's messed up. But the Chronicle asked me to come interview because we want to write stories about people in this way. See them as people first, not their station in life. And I told them, I only want to report from the bottom up. Like, I'm not interested in what this, public official who lives in, $750,000 house. I'm not interested in what they say. I'm not interested in letting them say whatever they want about the person living on the street. I want to center those voices first, and then I'll get comment from the public officials who aren't doing anything. Chronicle bought it, and that's cool. But I came with facts, and one of the facts that I came with is that Black Americans have lived under the shadow of institutionalized racism, state-sanctioned racism since emancipation. We're talking about the institution of slavery was followed by the institutional racism in regard to Jim Crow laws, massacres, lynchings, sundown towns, redlining, the killing of people of color by police with impunity. So I told the Chronicle that we need to address that, because by my napkin math, white people have had a 400-year head start on anyone else in this country. And how do we make sense of that gulf? Well, one way we make sense of it is like actually telling the truth about American history, is actually telling the truth in that you want to blame people for their station, but without acknowledging the rules of this country that put people in that station. I believe you can't address homelessness, something that I care deeply about. I can't look away. I believe you can't address it until you address the Bay Area's inequities. And when you think about that, it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, Black people are about 13% of this country's population, but they account for 40% nationally of people who are homeless. You take a city like San Francisco, where Black people have dwindled to, I don't know, like 5-6% of the population, but they're 30% of the unhoused. In Oakland, where I live, Black people are about 27-28% last census count, probably less now, but they are 70% of the unhoused population. Why is that? Like, how can that possibly be? Well, I decided to think more about that and talk to people. I met a man named Marcus. I have this penchant when I was a columnist of spending time in encampments around people, seeing how they lived, and trying to understand why we have been thus far unable to help them. Well, Marcus worked for the city of Berkeley his entire career. He took early retirement because the city was looking to downsize its staff when the housing bubble burst, and hey, this might be good for you. He was pitched that early retirement would be good for him, beneficial. Hey, you get this lump sum of money and you go out the door. Marcus got evicted because he didn't manage his money well. Got evicted from his apartment that he lived in for 18 years. West Oakland native, born and raised, as West Oakland natives like to tell you. He said, a couple days on his couch, on a sidewalk in front of his building. Then his nephew erected a tent on Northgate Avenue in Oakland next to his. So we're talking about generations of this family who have experienced homelessness. Come to find out that Marcus's brother slept in a car outside of his tent. So we have brothers who are unhoused. Marcus was beaten, robbed, stabbed, living in that tent. It was when sundown came, it almost felt like the energy in this encampment, which is, this is in a central location in Oakland. It's like a block from Telegraph. It's where people come off the freeway. I mean, it is very visible. It's not hidden at all. But it just felt like this area was, it just changed. It became threatening, particularly for folks who didn't exhibit aggression like Marcus. Marcus was chill. He just wanted to smoke his weed and try to drink away his pain. A nice man built him a wooden box, so he could live in on the street. And for that, it was fine until he's going in the box one night and someone hits him with the brick, knocks him out, and steals his money. So Marcus was one of the first people who moved into what Oakland deemed as a solution, transitional housing. It was a tough shed, essentially a shed where people store their lawn equipment. And no power, you can't deal with the temperature. I mean, it's hot in there. Windows didn't open properly. Finally, after living in that tough shed for several months, the city found Marcus an apartment in East Oakland, far away from his community. Marcus doesn't have a car. He has to take a bus and then walk and then to get back to West Oakland and get back to his apartment. This man would call me at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning because he was lonely, because he didn't have any friends out in East Oakland. This man died within 8 months of getting his own apartment. Housing is not the sole solution for homelessness. If you ask people who have spent time unhoused, just getting to know them, you will get a sense of the trauma that comes with being unhoused. You get a sense of how you no longer think about long-term. You are thinking about the next hour, the next couple hours. What am I going to eat? How am I going to eat? How am I going to get money to get something to eat if I don't make it to the shelter or the soup kitchen? What am I going to do tonight to keep myself safe? What am I going to do to keep the rats out of my stuff? What am I going to do if this person or that person decides to come over and take something else I have? How am I going to protect myself? This is what people think about. They're not thinking about, oh, well, I need to save money because I need this. Marcus, at one point while he was still living, Marcus couldn't figure out how to pay his rent. And he's getting notices in the mail telling him that if you do not pay, you're going to be evicted. Well, Marcus is like, can you help me? And I'm like, well, okay, I got to keep some distance because I'm a reporter. But you know what? I'm interested to know. I know you get X amount of dollars per month from Social Security. How can you get them to take out your monthly rent so you can pay it? It was nothing but $240 a month. It took me a day and a half. A day and a half. Now, finding out information is what I do for a living. I got skills. But can you imagine a man who's been living on the streets for 2 years and had all this trauma happen to him, carrying that, trying to figure it out? There are so many people who are in that situation that have this response of flight, of running, of just going back outside, just getting away instead of, understanding that they have a right to information. It took me a day and a half. I had to go through so many city organizations. I had to go through social workers just to figure out that how they could withdraw $240 a month from his bank account. Marcus, to me, he reflects this idea that the city just thinks we're transition and we'll get you in the home. This man couldn't work. This man couldn't even figure out how to get a driver's license. We're talking about people that need help. They need social workers. They don't need police. They need people who actually see them as people who understand that this person needs more help than the average American. So let me do this job for them. Another woman that I got to know on a street, her name is Jen. And I met her, after our shelter in place, and people are, inside their homes. And fortunately, I had a job that allowed me to be out on my bike. And I was so concerned about unhoused people, because at that point, we didn't know how the virus was transferred. And I was worried about people being outside. Turns out that they had the key to being outside, right? But I met this woman, Jen, and she was under the hood of her car, some busted up vehicle, trying to fix it. And then, I just asked her, what her story was. And this woman's like, yo, I'm trying to get my own place, and the people here won't help me. And she's like, look, I work a job at night. I'm going to school full time. I have money in my savings account, and I just need some help. I was like, oh, wow, you have savings? She's like, yeah. I was like, you have a job? She's like, yeah. She's like, look, I had a stroke in October. So October of 2019, this woman had a stroke, woke up, and the right side of her body couldn't move. She had been a sex worker, addicted to meth, and she did sex work to supply her meth habit. She said the stroke was a wake-up call, and I'm turning my life around, but I need some assistance with a rental deposit and someone just vouching for me that I'm going to pay my rent. I have all my pay stubs, and she showed me, here's my bank account, here's how much I have in savings. I'm ready to work. And the city, the programs were like, well, we just can't do it at this time. People aren't showing. And I'm like, but I still see listings on Craigslist. Like, can you help this person? Well, we're trying to. The city didn't help this person. I wrote, I think, 3 columns about her. And from those 3 columns, I got a total of $3,000 donated from readers. That $3,000 allowed this woman to get her own apartment. $3,000. That's nothing. That's nothing for the billions we spend on speculation, on a hyperspeed tunnel. Shit, California lost $20 million or $20 billion in unemployment fraud. And we're just supposed to accept that this country, this state doesn't have money available for education and for the unhoused? It's unconscionable to allow our elected officials to tell us that. But that's part of the problem, y'all, is the people we elect. The Bay Area lauds itself as this liberal bastion. It's the birthplace of the free speech movement. It's the home of the Black Panthers. Everyone is welcome here. Well, that's true for people on the street. I respect it. Oakland and the Bay Area, San Jose, Vallejo, it's kind of like hip hop, right? If you come correct, we'll respect you. But if you front, we got an issue. Our elected officials are fronting on us right now. Our elected officials act as if the Bay Area isn't one of the most segregated places in America. And I'm not just saying that. Shit, there's a whole institute at Berkeley that's studying this and releasing information. So either this narrative is false of the Bay Area, or this data is lying. Well, I'll take the narrative. That being false, right? There was, there's been this uptick in violence in the Bay Area, particularly with shooting. 2 issues about that. Hey, Albert, how much time do I have, man? I'm just like, I'm in it right now.
About another 15 minutes.
All right, cool. Because I'm in it right now. Okay. So we have an uptick in violence, and this is happening after the defund the police movement. And, the police are on TV because TV cameras will love, forget context. Let's just put, the police chief wants to talk to us. We'll get in front of the cameras, this is terrible, and we need more police. We need, oh, thank you for Adam for putting that in the chat. So we need more police because police are the only ones that can solve this problem. And then we have, police talking down to communities saying, y'all need to stop this. You need to stop this. Well, first off, guns aren't manufactured in these communities that have experienced this uptick in violence. Where are the guns coming from? So you could say Nevada, okay, well, who's dealing those guns that get into these communities where there's a propensity of violence? Silence. What are you doing? And this is what I'm asking police consistently. I mean, I would just hammer police. Look, I have a great relationship with PIO. I had a great relationship with, I have a great relationship with San Francisco's chief, not so much with Oakland's former chief who got removed. Would laugh, joke up, go for walks, whatever. But I would hammer these people because they tried to play me thinking like I'm cool, but like try to play me when it comes to publication. I would hammer them because how are you tracing these guns? Like, why are you having such an issue? Like, how do these guns get from a dealer over here and into East Oakland, into Vallejo, into Contra Costa? Like, how does that happen when you have no gun dealers there? Well, we're thinking about it. I found that Oakland turned down UCLA, who wanted to do a free gun tracing analysis for the department to show them where your guns are coming from. According to Brady, which is against, it tracks gun violence, but tracks the issue of gun violence in this country, found that only 5% of dealers in this country, only 5% are linked to the illicit gun market. That's nothing but doable. But here's the issue. And this is our elected officials at work. There's something called the T-Hart Amendment that doesn't allow law enforcement to trace guns unless it's been involved in a specific crime, right? Even then, you don't know who purchased or who sold the gun because they have to destroy the data in 24 hours after purchase. That is the NRA at work. That is our public officials blaming communities for gun violence and not doing anything about it. Excuse me, no. They do something about it. They say we need more police. Police already occupy communities. Police have already inflicted historical trauma on communities of color. Why do we accept this idea that police are going to solve the issues? Police can't address poverty. Police can't address poor education. Police can't address lack of jobs. Police can't address lack of resources. Only thing police can do is arrest people. So how is that going to solve issues in the community? Police aren't even good at solving the crimes that they respond to. So you mean to tell me that more officers with bigger guns and deadlier ammunition is going to solve gun violence in communities? Like, that does not make any sense. But that's how this country has always operated, more of the same instead of trying something different. Our elected officials in the Bay Area are part of the issue. And here's why. The Bay Area is 60% people of color. So that's more than a majority. That's a super majority. The Bay Area's elected officials, now I'm talking about from Senate, Congress, to state Senate, to all other legislatures. I'm talking about our county representatives. I'm talking about at the city level. 60% of the Bay Area's representatives are white. So when you ask the question, why aren't people being helped? Or why aren't we putting forth, I don't know, solutions that actually can help people? Well, there's your answer. The people aren't properly represented in the Bay Area. I have affinity for Mayor Libby Schaaf in Oakland. I think she's trying her hardest. But do I believe that the mayor has an understanding of what a single mother of multiple kids who's trying to make ends meet with 2 jobs? Do I think she has an understanding of what she goes through? No. How could she? I think that we need, before we have any of these issues resolved, we need to resolve who is representing us. Are you for the people, or are you for special interests? Politicians, after they're elected, their job is to stay in that office or go to another office. It's not about the people, because if it was about the people, they do more, I guess, life-changing initiatives that would probably force them out of office. I mean, you see Governor Gavin Newsom, we had a recall effort that cost this state, which Republicans will tell you has outrageous spending, but this state had to pony up $275 million for a recall that was doomed to fail, for an effort to get Newsom out of office that could have waited a year and saved $275 million. But the Democrats are the problem. The GOP put a Black man and said, hey, here's a Black man. It reminded me of Trump saying, look at my African American. This Black man is a racist. This Black man is a misogynist. And this is the best your party can do? It made me so upset to learn that the recall effort really took off after the governor had dinner against his own coronavirus protocols. I mean, that's wrong, at the French Laundry, but it didn't take off until a former law enforcement officer started a campaign on Facebook. And this law enforcement officer, former law enforcement officer, is a racist. He's a xenophobe. He thinks that immigrants to this country of immigrants should be tagged like cattle. So I mean, I sat back and I'm new at this job, and I've watched our politics team, and afterwards I'm like, so you mean to tell me that you treated a recall effort as an issue that voters care about, an issue that Californians really need to address, when the push was from a racist and a law enforcement officer or former law enforcement officer, and that's not in this coverage anywhere? You've got to be kidding me. Look, I feel that I can get very animated by subject of race, the subject of housing. And that's because if this country is as great as people like to say it is, and the Republican narrative is like, you don't like America if you keep talking bad about it. No, I want us to talk about America realistically. Like, America doesn't work the same as it does for people who can afford campaigns. Like, that's why we don't have representation that matches the demographic, because people don't have access to the same capital. I mean, if we did, then we would have parity in this country. We do not. We do not. Our elected officials are passing the buck on the unhoused, and it's costing us. You know why? Because we have to pay through our tax dollars for the same thing. You are unhoused, you go to an emergency room, that comes out of our pockets. What if we took care of people so we didn't have to pay those costs? What if we, I don't know, decided to help people? Blaming people for situations that they find themselves in, situations that were brought on by the legacy of racism in this country, is not the solution, and it doesn't absolve us. And so I like to ask, my colleagues right now, people who are thinking about going into the profession, I ask them, well, no, really, I challenge them. Is the story you're being told true? And who benefits from the story being told? And if it benefits people in power, you have to ask yourself why. We're supposed to trust that people, our elected officials, will do what's in the best interest of people. Well, if that's the case, like, call them to task. How is it that the way you voted on this measure, case in point, San Francisco Board of Supervisors turning down a housing project, like, how is your vote going to benefit the people who need it? How? Like, how is it going to benefit the people who need affordable housing? How is it going to benefit students? Like, seriously. And I have these same conversations. How I'm talking right now is how I talk on the street. It's how I talk in City Hall. Like, I come with it, and I'm tired of performance. I'm tired of performative gestures. I'm tired of black squares on social media. Like, nah, you can miss me with all of that. I want action. I don't want words. I want action. And I feel that journalism has to demand action. We talk about accountability, and it remains nebulous because we aren't holding people accountable. I mean, it's just until recently that the New York Times is putting high up in the story, first or second graph, that's calling the former president a liar, because he is. The former president has propagated this lie that the election was stolen when all evidence refutes that. Yet and still, we have Republican legislatures across the country rolling back voting rights based on that lie. And I ask you, who is impacted by rolling back of voting rights? Do you think white people are? Hell no. It's people of color. Now, why would Republican legislatures roll back the voting rights of people of color? It is a disenfranchisement tactic that was used previously. It is, once again, we can't win by convincing you to vote for us, so we'll just make it harder for you to vote. And I've had conversations with wealthy people about, well, aren't we trying to aren't we trying to keep voting safe? Aren't we trying to keep it, to where it's unimpeachable? I was like, well, who is impeaching voting right now? Someone who lost, someone who lies for a living. Like, think about that. So you mean to tell me I'm supposed to believe this liar over people in districts, in counties, and states that check the voting tabulations twice, 3 times, because this white man is saying, oh, I lost, so, it must be rigged. It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me. But no other country can we get someone like the former president than America. Like, America rewards that kind of behavior. And I want to be a party to stopping that, because I believe in people. I believe in helping people. I believe that we cannot consider ourselves the greatest country in the world when we have more homeless people than most countries in the world, and when we imprison more people than any country in the world. Like, I don't understand it. We have indentured servitude in this country. One more, and not open for questions, is that, after emancipation, a law was enacted that made it illegal, essentially, to be on the street without a job. Well, who was that directed toward? Black people, right? Well, white people have all the capital, they have all the businesses, so who's going to give me a job? Well, you're not giving me a job. So you know what this country did? It arrested Black men and sent them to jail. And then they leased the convicts to the plantations. What we're having right now is Black and brown men in prison who are making things for multinational companies for pennies. And I think, I don't know, y'all. I mean, I feel sometimes that, if I can be real with you for a second, I feel sometimes that we've all been set up, and right now, anyone who cares about anyone is being made to demonized as woke. And we have to employ more people who want to respond to that. And the way we respond to that is telling stories about real people, telling real stories, and giving voice to the people who have been historically marginalized and oppressed in that country. I'm gonna stop right there because I got to close my curtain because I'm all like washed out, but I'll take some questions.
All right, no, thank you. Yeah, you were turning into a hologram, it seemed like, Otis. That was great. That was great. And we're going to open it up for question on this last point. Vagrancy laws have always, here in California, just reminded me of, where I'm from in Los Angeles. They were key sets of laws that were dynamic, targeting indigenous folks. And Kelly Lytle Hernandez chronicles this in her book, The City of Inmates, how Los Angeles became the carceral capital of the nation and still remains that, by applying these vagrancy laws, sweeping natives out once their land was taken, the Mexicans, Asians, and putting them in jails and then releasing them out. And here, after the gold rush, right, where again Mexicans were driven off, vagrancy laws were established and leased them. Great.
Yep. Isn't that, Albert? Isn't that just ridiculous? It's like, it's not enough that you found or settled this country and took indigenous land. It is just we just allow these laws to be enacted to imprison us, and it's got to stop.
Yeah, no, that was really great. Not that was established, but to analyze it and to really see the connections to our contemporary moment is something that we always want to see. So, I mean, we want to open it up, of course, to our students in the audience. Anybody have a question, comment for Otis? This was really, had me thinking. We were dropping a lot of links on sundown towns, on segregation, redlining.
Thank you for that. That was legit. Thank you.
So this is, well, thanks to all my comrades here who were dropping those links. And I also wanted to give a shout out to our journalism professor, Michael Leverton, and his recent book publication. I'm gonna drop that now in the New York Times on the Generation Occupy. So really building in that kind of grassroots representation on the ground from the less than that 1%, right? So we're going to keep that tradition going here at DVC. So we want to open it up.
Thank you, Albert.
Any student, whoa, the questions are coming in.
Let's
You
do
can
it.
drop it in the chat if you feel more comfortable. You can just unmute, raise your hand. We're very flexible here. And the recording will be on our website once you get that downloaded. So Justin, you have your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. How's it going? Thank you, Otis, for the information and the speech that you gave. I really appreciate it. It's very eye-opening. Oh no, don't tell me. Oh, it's still good. Okay, froze for a second. Sorry. So you were talking about homelessness in the Bay Area as a result of inaction being taken upon it. Basically ignoring the people themselves, right? Talking about homeless itself, but not talking to the people that are homeless, kind of ignoring it and feeling like I know what's right for them and stuff. So as far as the Bay Area, one of the bigger issues I see is kind of the NIMBYism, but it's kind of disguised as like, well, we're not building homes, right? Because we're setting land aside for parks and stuff. It's not that we're not racist or anything, or we don't want these low income people here. We're just trying to save the area to better the community or whatever. And I've noticed that really taking off in the last couple of years and stuff. Case in point, like at Alameda Island, they took a big chunk of the island and they set it off as a park and stuff. We're clearly like it's a landing strip. There's no real native fauna. There's no anything, and it can be used for housing. But it's kind of used as like, oh, the scapegoat of like, well, we're saving it, but we're not. We can't build housing on it. So I guess getting your opinion on that as this camouflaged, like saving the community type thing. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I like how you said that, this camouflage, saving the community. I'm going to mess this up, but I think it was a tweet, but I don't know where I read the tweet. It was a tweet, but someone had rounded it up. It might have been in a newsletter, but someone wrote that there are no more dog whistles. Like we can't, like there, like this, the language is no longer coded. We know what you're saying with this. Oh, not in my backyard. I'll give you an example. So I went to Atlanta for 6 months, and then I moved back out to the Bay Area, and I moved right into my same neighborhood. Now I live in a neighborhood. It's called Rockridge. It's probably one of the nicest neighborhoods in Oakland. I mean, outside my front door, within 15-minute walk. I've got a grocery. No. 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I've got 3 grocery stores. I've got 2 bookstores. I've got bars. I've got I got a library. I've got cuisine from all over the world, all on my street. And I think, more people should have access to living life like that, right? Well, there was a school, CCA, had a building, right? And the city of Oakland was like, we're gonna buy this and we're gonna move people from shelters. I guess moms with children got the first look. We're gonna move them here. Man, these people, white people, at these meetings were like, well, we have to think about how this building should be used. It could be used in a different way. It could be, we really need to think deeply about that. And what they're saying is like, we don't want Black and brown moms with children living in our neighborhood. These people who are arguing against it are the same people who put Black Lives Matter signs up in their windows after George Floyd was murdered. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there listening, and I have a neighbor, she's in her 70s, we hang out, white woman, and I appreciate her because she's trying to educate herself, because she is an example of what a professor told me she's like, imagine being white and the world is not how you thought it was for your whole life. Imagine trying to comprehend that. Like, people would have problems with that. And, this neighbor, but she was adamant that, we have to think it's the land, as you mentioned, but we have to think about, what uses this building could be. I'm like, well, why not apartments for people who need it right now? Like, what's wrong with that? And she couched it in something completely different. And I told her, like, this is systemic racism. Like, you want to deny people who need housing because it doesn't fit your worldview of who should be your neighbor. And she acknowledged that. She was like, I'm worried that, we might see a rise of people getting robbed and things like that. And it's like, no, I don't know. Maybe you will, but that is a symptom of how people have been treated historically in this country. And about that point about people being robbed, I'm like, the city of Oakland knows there's crews of people rolling around here robbing people. They're just incapable of doing anything about it, but they need more guns and people. I push back whenever I get a chance on a NIMBYism. In San Francisco, when the people hired their own lawyers, sued the city because the city wanted to put a navigation center in the neighborhood, and people are up in arms. And I'm like, think about it. You have a place where people can go get help, where social workers won't have to be roaming the streets. They will have people there and they can reach them. And furthermore, if there is an uptick in crime, guess what? The police don't have to go around trying to solve it. They can just go to the navigation center and people will tell you. Like, that's the thing that I get. People act like, they see one homeless person in distress or having in a mental episode on the street. They think that all homeless people are like that. No,
they're not.
No, man, I've had some of the best meals, and this is real talk. Some of the best meals I've had have been in homeless encampments, on grills. I mean, there's people who have power. It's just the whole narrative about it is so wrong. And then you get where, oh, well, we want to do this to help them. And then people are like, nah, I can't do that. I was disgusted by my neighborhood. And close to BART too. So yeah, I've got the neighborhood that people would want, people who don't have cars or reliable transportation. They need this. And they tried to stall it out, but we haven't had any crime. There haven't been people talking in coded language on Nextdoor about the people living there. And I walk by this every day. People wave. I like seeing young kids actually having access to opportunity because the schools are great in this neighborhood. But thank you for your question, Justin. I hope I answered it.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much.
Oh, one more thing, Justin. If you're interested in journalism, call those people out.
Yeah.
When we started, I'm reading a story where, I was disappointed with what we produced first go around in school board. And I'm like, give me a story that actually is representative of people who don't want the recall and why. Like, we let the people who have money and power talk. Let the people who don't have money and power talk. So yeah, it's like call people out for what it is. Call them out for their racism.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because, I believe the city, either Orinda or Lafayette, and I'm sure those are fairly highfalutin, high income, et cetera, and they were having an issue building low income housing, which was only, I believe, 20 or 30% below the median income for that area, which still would have been ridiculously high. I think 400,000 per year or 300,000 per year or something like that. And it was like, well, they're not hitting the $1 million mark, so we can't have them here. And it's like, huh?
Right.
So-
right.
But then they built like $1 million homes over across the ridge, and they're like, that's cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's weird. I see that.
So I always find it funny,
So we have a
You
couple
know,
of questions. I don't want
sorry.
to cut this off, Jessica, but we have a couple of questions coming from
Gotcha.
the educator standpoint and from the student. Jessica and both Dr. Elliott are asking similar questions. What can they do from educators can do to help this issue of the unhoused population? And from student perspective, what can be done?
So, oh, that's interesting. I spoke to a class, 2019, I guess, right? Shout out to the pandemic. Wear your mask. I spoke about homelessness, and this young white woman said she was really struck by it. So she was riding Muni, and there was a man who was like in filthy clothes sitting on Muni, and he was with another person. The person got off, and this man was like, "Hey, I to people on the train, hey, I'm trying to get some money, get some new clothes," and people were just like moving away and just disregarding him. This young woman was like, "Okay, yeah, you want to go? Let's get off here and go to Target." And she said, as soon as they walked in the door, someone from Target was like, "Hey, miss, can I help you? Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "I had two people behind us the whole time, and everywhere we went." And so she was getting sweatpants, I think a sweatshirt. She was looking for gloves. They had already switched over the inventory. I forget, underwear. I don't know. She was getting a few things, some snacks. And she said there was two people behind them the whole time, or just, like watching out. Someone would always all of a sudden have to fold clothes in their vicinity, and she was like, they're asking me if I need help, but here's a man. That's right. He was bandaged. Like he had just been in the hospital. So she was like, they're asking me if I need help instead of him. And she was like, that really showed me how the world sees the unhoused, but also how they see me. They saw me, instead of as someone who's, helping someone, they saw me as, I need to be saved, right? She's a young, white, blonde woman. And she was like, I can't live like this. And I'm like, good, because I can't either. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out and take a unhoused person to dinner, but what you can do is try to immerse yourselves more in the issues that I brought up, but particularly what your representative is doing to solve the problem, and demand more. I think that the more young people are galvanized, the sooner we can actually make a dent in the problem. Because right now, the population exploded from 2017, 2019. Who knows what the pandemic's going to do? Most experts think it's just going to be even more out of control. I would ask you to try to educate yourself more, but then educate your peers. Or if they're not wanting to hear that talk, but when they do say something cross, or when they disparage the unhoused, check them. Be like, you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what that person's circumstances is. And furthermore, our country has historically punished poverty. You can be poor, and this country will, cops will come, you living out of your vehicle, guess what? They'll come and tow that vehicle. And you have to pay a $600 fee to get it out. But guess what? It goes up every day. You have no chance of paying it. Your driver's license, birth certificate, all your important documents are in that vehicle that the city towed. And I think you have to, people have to understand that it's not as simple as, well, why don't they go get a job? Well, okay, so yeah, let me be dirty. I don't have a shower because showers aren't provided consistently. But yeah, let me go on McDonald's and make get a $17 an hour job. And guess what? I still can't afford a place to live. because I don't have money for my deposit and my first month's rent, and probably another tax on top of that because I might have an eviction on my record. It is up to us to demand more. And from a professor's perspective, I think we need to educate people. I think I see my job. I used to see my job as, you know, I'm writing stories. I am recasting American history. But now I see my job as educating people, because I have found that, say, in the neighborhood like Rockridge, I have people talking about the people that live on a street and as if they know them, which they have no idea what's going on. I mean, I know people who will say things about Latinx folks, who will say things about AAPI folks, and I'm like, do you know anybody from that demo? Just, you know, well, I had one friend who was a coworker back in, I'm like, nah, you don't know anybody, shut up, you know? And these are people like I socialize with. It's like, shut up. Like, I demand that from people I socialize with or I spend time with. And if you don't have the cultural competency, and if you don't try to educate yourself, like, we have nothing to talk about. We have nothing to talk about. I think that it's up to our professors, it's up to our teachers to educate people, because people didn't learn it. We learned that Thanksgiving was the Pilgrims and the Indians, and they're just sitting down in kumbaya. Man, the first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims didn't invite the indigenous people. The indigenous people showed up because they heard gunfire. They thought they were at war. It's like, it's to combat the narrative that has been sold to us, we have to teach people. And I'm wholly committed to that if people want to learn. Now, I mean, I have the position where I can be like, nah, we're good, I don't have to talk to you. But I think teachers and professors, if people are in your classroom, try to reach them, especially people who think they know everything, because the people who know anything know that they don't know everything.
So we are heading towards the end of our event. Are there any other burning questions that you have for Otis? We have time for one last burning question.
Okay, I'll put my email address in the chat if anyone wants to talk about journalism, the Bay Area, America, the former president winning in 2024, and how our lives are going to be impacted by that. Like, we're screwed.
Oh God.
That man is vindictive.
Otis, if you will permit, I have one question for you for both our social justice and journalism students. So sounds like you were really immersed in this work, and clearly your passion comes through. I was just wondering about your role as a reporter, and I think of this as a researcher myself, the relationships that you form on the ground and the emotion work involved. How do you stay sane, and how do you keep doing this work, and how do you keep the journalistic integrity going, and all of that? So it's like it seems like a very complex balancing act where you're reporting on the issue, but you're also deeply involved in the community.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, why, like, my involvement is so, like, I am a representation of America working for people, right? Neither of my parents graduated from college. I think my mom did a semester before she got married to my father. And their whole goal was to make sure that I, like, graduated from college. I mean, just singular focus. And so I got sent to a private white school. And then when we moved south, I got sent to a public school where it was all white people. I mean, I'm talking about my classes, like, there wasn't another person of color in many of my classes. And I had that quality education, that foundation. I think everyone should have access to that. at the minimum should have access to education. And so I'm trying to do my part for this country, this world really, and uplifting other people. America was smart when it desegregated places, because what it did was it destabilized the Black community, the Black movement really. And it allowed, just a few people to get through, and then they cut it off. And so America has this appearance, Barack Obama, elected president. Oh, we don't have racism anymore because we have a Black president. That's just false. And I want more people to have access to opportunity. Now, how I dealt with, I didn't deal with it too well. I took a job in Atlanta. Like, that was me, like, okay, I need a break from this. And I realized that I love the Bay Area. I wanted to come back. But I think you have to get close. You have to be on the ground if you're going to tell an accurate story of a person. You have to get to know them pretty intimately if you're going to allow them to follow. Marcus, I told you about, I followed him for like 2 years until he died, so 2.5 years. But this man, before I even pulled out a recorder or a notebook, it's like, hey, can I sit down on this crate next to you and let these rats run by? And like, can we just talk? Can I just get a sense of who you are? You can get a sense of who I am. And then I'm going to ask you if I can, interview you. The next thing you know, we know each other, So I think mental health of journalists who do this kind of work, we need to be more aware and of how it impacts us. And I'm still figuring that out. But I can't stop doing this work because I want to leave. I'm just trying to make us better. I'm trying to just do what I can. I don't have money to spread around, so I'm trying to just spread the word. And I hope it works. I hope there is some change, but I have to change my tactics at my new job, where I'm really gonna go. I don't want to say after, but I'm really gonna call politicians out. I'm just no more of this double speak. I'm coming.
Well, that really resonates, Otis. You want to make us better. That's the whole point of education. So that's a really good message to close on. We are going to plan an informal social justice day soon. We'll keep you posted about that. All the students here who
Can I come? Are you going to do it in person?
Oh, I wish, but very soon, maybe next semester.
Next semester, we'll hold you to that. Yeah.
Well, all the students here,
here,
who were saying that they want to find out about how to get involved. We'll definitely have our leaders from community organizations there. We'll have our student leaders from our college there. So we're looking forward to that Zoom event again to connect people to each other. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Otis.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
And do send that link out, Albert and Sangha, because so many journalists, I know that our students who weren't able to get on today are going to love watching this. So that'd be great as soon as it's ready. Great talk. Amazing.
All right. No, thanks. It was good. All right. Let's stop record.